Whoever you are and whatever has called you into this sanctuary, you are welcome here, and we are glad to be together on this glorious rainy morning. Live Oak is a welcoming community. Our congregation is a spiritual home dedicated to celebrating and nurturing our diversity of thought, our generosity of heart, and the search for truth and meaning in our lives. This morning, our guest speaker is William Peters. William is a marriage and family therapist at the Family Therapy Institute of Santa Barbara. He's also the founder and executive director of the Shared Crossing Project, whose mission is to create awareness about the profound and healing experiences that are possible for the dying and their loved ones at the end of life. William served for 2 years as a hospice volunteer with the Zen Hospice Project at Laguna Honda Hospital in San Francisco. He also worked as a teacher and social worker in Belize, Guatemala, and Peru. William holds a master's in education in group dynamics from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, a master of arts in integral counseling psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies, and a bachelor of arts in political economy of industrial societies from the University of California, Berkeley. William also happens to be a friend of mine and a fellow graduate of Courage to Lead. This morning, William will be sharing his own search for truth and meaning and will be available after the service to talk more about shared death experiences and the Shared Crossing Project. We hope you'll join the discussion. We'll allow time to get coffee and tea, and then we'll ring the bell to invite you back into the sanctuary.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. This talk has taken on an interesting experience for me that I wasn't anticipating. When Barbara asked me to do this talk, she said, I want you to talk about your life that leads up to why you do the work you do today. And so I said, oh, okay, I don't often get an opportunity to speak about that. And so over the last few weeks, I've been reflecting on the various chapters of my life that have led me to the work that I do, working with people in or preparing for conscious, connected, and loving end-of-life experiences. I want to begin by saying that throughout my life, I've always been fascinated by the great existential questions, which are primarily, who am I? What is the purpose of a human life? Did I exist before this human incarnation? And will I exist after it? And perhaps the greatest question which each of us must face every day: how do I live my life with the most meaning possible? My circumstances forced me to take on this last question because, as you'll see, I had to face a fair amount of adversity. Not everyone's form of adversity is different, and as you shall see, mine took the form of physical pain. So today I'm going to share with you some of these formative experiences, and all in service to this question: what makes a life worth living? I'm going to take the cat out of the bag right away and say to you from the get-go here, for me, it has been my most painful, body-breaking, heart-wrenching experiences that have engaged me in the soul-searching process. And this process has shaped my understanding for the purpose and meaning of my life, and I dare say for everyone's life as we all share this human experience. I'm going to speak in the first person because I think that makes it more personal. So, I want to tell you just a little bit about me from my early days. I grew up as a real basic upper middle class kid in suburbia, was raised Catholic. My family is still very Catholic. Raised in the Jesuit tradition of Catholicism, which focuses on service for others and social justice. Had trouble in school in my early days. Had some discipline problems and even some learning challenges. I was described as strong-willed. Often found myself taking on authority. My core identity in adolescence was that I was an athlete, hardworking, very disciplined, achievement-oriented, and probably a bit perfectionistic. But everything changed on December 29th in 1979. Let us never doubt that our whole sense for what a human life is about can change in a split second. On this day, on the 29th in 1979, I was skiing with a good friend, John. It was just a normal day at Squaw Valley, USA. I wasn't skiing all that well. We were going down one of the tougher runs when I picked up speed and inadvertently caught an edge on my skis. They crossed and I was catapulted into the air. My bindings did not release when I hit the snow at about 40 miles an hour. I heard a crunch and a crack, and I immediately was catapulted out of my body. I went sailing through an electric universe. I saw things of beauty that I never imagined. At the same time, my life was going through my mind. Every snippet, every little interaction laid right before me. I saw how every experience, especially the human interactions, they mattered. I could feel the way my actions impacted others, and others' actions impacted me. As I twirled through the universe, I entered this light. To me, that was God. I was raised Catholic. And I pled with this light. I knew instantly, I've been here before. I've done this hundreds of times. I am not ready to die. I haven't done my work. Let me not waste another life. This loving light gently transmitted to me in some ways that I could never explain here. I love you. Go back. Make something of your life. So this is what we call a before and after experience. Nothing before this point is like anything after it. I've never felt anything so real as that experience with the light. Over the next 5 years, my body, from this spinal injury, gradually declined. I crept into a state of chronic back pain, sciatica, other related compensatory patterns in my body took over to combat the pain. Western doctors had no remedies for my back pain. The medicines they gave me took out my mind before they even took the pain away. So I made a commitment, I will not take this medication. I'd rather have my consciousness than to be numb to this human experience. As the pain and limitation increased, I lost my identity as an athlete, as an able-bodied man. I felt anxious and afraid about my future. I became irritable, resentful, and angry about my physical pain and losses. I could not sit in a restaurant. I could not drive a car more than 10 minutes without pain coursing through my body. Every aspect of my life had to be adjusted and adapted for this pain. My peers in college went about their lives, and I looked on with envy and, yes, jealousy. My life was crumbling in pain and despair. And this is the piece that talks about the cultural milieu I was living in, and perhaps we all share together. I felt like a failure. I felt ashamed of myself. Something in my life view, in my training, in my culture did not allow for pain and suffering. I was caught in a neurotic inner dialogue that was based on a belief that there was something wrong with me. And if I was in pain and suffering, it was something I did or something inherently flawed about my being. And my mind kept asking, how could this happen? What did I do to deserve this pain? At that time, getting therapy was not an option because, in my mind, it was for people who were really messed up. And I guess I wasn't. I've come a long way. I'm a therapist now. I sought solace in my Catholic faith, but it did not assuage for the pain I was feeling. But I went about my life. I was determined to live as fully as I could and not let the pain slow me down. I traveled in Europe one summer before my senior year and happened to be traveling up in what is now, which was at that time behind the Iron Curtain in Yugoslavia. And when traveling up, we went through Kosovo on an overnight bus ride. And I awoke one morning after this overnight bus ride and heard people clamoring, yelling outside our bus. I opened the blinds and saw hundreds of Muslim women with their hands outstretched towards the bus like this. And they were also going like this. They were begging for food. I could see only their dark eyes through the scarves, the burqas that the Muslim women wear. Their eyes portrayed unrestrained desperation. I had never seen people so openly, without any sense of shame, expressing their vulnerability and needs in this way. I was moved to tears without really even knowing why. But I made a vow to myself in that moment, I would need to be with people like that. I needed to heal, and I knew they had a teaching for me. And so I returned home, and I was committed to find a way to be with poor people. That's how it was framed in my mind, as politically incorrect as that is. I needed to be with disenfranchised, those who did not have the safety net as I did. And so I called my old Jesuit friends at the high school I went to and said, look, I know you have missions all over the world. I want to go there, anywhere. This launched me on a journey that would take me through Belize, Guatemala, and Peru over a 4-year period in the late 80s. My first job in Belize was absolutely divine. It's one of the most exhilarating years of my life. I taught at the high school. In this country, teachers are revered because they're seen as bearers of knowledge and wisdom and help the culture go forward. About 3 nights a week, I was invited over to the houses of my students. I got to see the diversity of Belizean culture and society. Sometimes going into homes that had servants opening the doors and serving meals and cooks. Other times going into homes with dirt floors where you could literally see the rats running about. This reality was so affirming to me, I can't even tell you why. As I was reflecting during this time, I was reading over my old journals, and I remember in a journal entry, since I just read it, the tropical breezes are caressing my aching body, and yet I am so happy. I had never known such joy before. Who would have thunk I'd be so happy in this rat-infested, poverty-stricken town with open sewers running everywhere? The tide would rise and fall, and so would the sewage, and the stench was horrible. But I was so happy. I marveled at life's mystery, and I knew that I would not be there had I not broken my back. Peru and Guatemala were different stories. Guatemala, they were both having civil wars. I went to Guatemala for a while, but I'll jump to Peru because it does enough to explain my experience. I was hired to work as a director, a teacher, and then a director for a center serving working children and their families. There were 6 to 8 Americans, most of them Jesuit priests, and a few volunteers. And we were working with displaced Aymara Indians from the highlands, which the Andes area in Peru. They would come down, displaced from their land because of the civil war and famine. And our job was to find them shelter, running water, electricity, food, and medical care. This was the most intense human suffering I had ever seen. In the midst of a war, with oppression, violence, physical and emotional abuse, disease, injury, trauma were commonplace. I was overwhelmed, stressed out, and physically and emotionally suffering. Every night, I read the Serenity Prayer. I'll read it to you now. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I and my hardworking, well-intended co-workers in the mission there clearly did not possess this wisdom at all. We got up every day believing it was our job to heal these people of all their pain and suffering. It took me a long time to realize that our beautiful American human rights ideals and Catholic ideals from Vatican II about the preferential option for the poor was simply unachievable in this war-torn country. And my heart laid in the midst of that, wanting to do the best I could, but burning myself out every day. And yet there was another way of being with this pain and suffering that was being exhibited right in front of us. The Aymara elders and shamans were coming down from the highlands too with their people, flushed out of their safe havens. Their presence in the midst of such pain and suffering initially confounded me. Are they in denial? Are they high? Too much ayahuasca last night? Why are they emitting such peace? How can they smile as their people are suffering so much? These elders and shamans seem to be rooted in another reality, unflustered by the chaos of this world. Their calm brought into relief my uneasiness with pain and suffering, my own and theirs. I wondered if the eyes of those Muslim women in Kosovo were leading me to the wisdom of these Aymara shamans. Somehow they held a peace that was deeper than my faith, and I yearned for that. I left Peru, lice-infested and in physical pain and mental anguish. Clearly I was traumatized by this experience. But strange as it may sound, I was so thankful. I can't explain the mystery behind that, I should say. And I don't need to explain it, but I learned so much during my time there. I felt like I lived lifetimes in moments with each refugee coming down from the hill. They would share with me their experience. They were vulnerable. They were in need of help. I couldn't do much of anything as much as I tried. But I got to touch the depth of human experience. That which we all share, our vulnerability. I came back and landed in an equally difficult job because I was fluent in Spanish. I was recruited to work at the St. Anthony's Foundation in San Francisco. I'm smiling because those of you who know St. Anthony's Foundation know that it is in the Tenderloin. It serves more meals to homeless people than any other institution in San Francisco. It happened to be at the time of the AIDS epidemic, as we now refer to it. And our clientele were indigent, mostly gay men and IV drug users, dying in squalor in Skid Row anonymously, because most of them actually had hidden their homosexuality to their families. Previously healthy men ravaged by HIV, surrounded by shame, guilt, isolation, and alienation, were the people I worked with daily. And they let me into their world because as a social worker at St. Anthony's, I offered them food and a voice and a heart who truly cared. Because I actually did. I could not understand how this could be happening. I was no saint, but it was curiosity and wonder. How could this be happening? And so I got to spend a lot of time with these men. And they taught me a great deal about courage, dignity, and inner strength to surrender to pain and to death. And for this too, I was thankful. And as I look back, I realized in that great poem or parable, the Zen parable, maybe, I'm pointing to the child gathering that was just before us, all of this is a big maybe. I can only know or believe that I got to these places because of this day on December 29th when I broke my back. I contracted a rare blood disease that landed me in the ICU of Kaiser Hospital, Oakland, and soon found myself floating above my bed, watching the nurses talk about the patients, watching janitors clean out their closets. I was very unemotional about this. I was at peace, just above my body. I learned from that experience, I am not my body. This was my second near-death experience. But since I hadn't really even thought about my previous near-death experience, I never mentioned it to anybody. This was the one that really landed home for me. I had to wake up to who I was and what was my true nature. And it was not dependent upon my physical body. The healing from this idiopathic thrombocytopenia, which is a form of hemophilia, was quite difficult. The Kaiser doctors wanted to remove my spleen, which I didn't feel right, and it sent me on a healing journey. I put out help to my friends, and a good friend, actually not such a good friend, just an acquaintance, said to me, "You want to go see Dr. Yakai Lai? He's an Asian herbalist in San Francisco." Well, he started giving me herbs. I started sweating profusely every night. And within 2 weeks, my idiopathic thrombocytopenia, which was rendered by Western doctors as incurable, was gone. Gone. They looked at me and they said, "Oh, it couldn't have been the herbs you were taking. Those are dangerous for you." But I was so grateful for idiopathic thrombocytopenia. It almost killed me. But it taught me about health and healing. So I entered back into the mainstream of life, got my psychotherapy degree, started seeing clients, and then I had another freak accident. I broke my foot dancing. Who would have thunk? I went to my brother was a doctor, and I had a number of early diagnoses from people that just didn't seem to make sense, and they were contradictory. My brother said, "I want you to go to the best medical clinic here in LA." And so I did. So I came down, got an MRI, CAT scan, all these battery of tests, and the surgeon said, yeah, you need surgery, I'm going to put a screw in, it's going to be a really difficult surgery, but you're going to be fine. I said, okay, well, it's been 6 months of not walking, not weight bearing. I said, okay. But I left my sweater in the radiology lab. So I went down there. And the radiologist said to me, well, good news, huh? Good news, I got to have surgery, put a screw put in. He said, are you kidding me? I said, no, that's what he said. He said, come here, here's your MRI. And he said, this is fine. I said, well, I don't know what it looks like. He says, okay, don't tell anybody. I'm going to do your other foot right now. He did my other foot. He put them side by side. He says, that foot's fine. It's just like this one. Get out of here. Don't get surgery. Can you imagine? This is one of the top centers in LA. What an angel. But then the second part came in. There's no one to take care of me here. I still can't walk. I can't weight bear. And I dropped into a state of shame again. Those thoughts, the mind that creeps in. I already had chronic back pain. Now I was handicapped. I was depressed. I was hopeless and helpless. And I withdrew from society. I moved back into my parents' home because I couldn't do anything. I literally could not walk from here to that door without being in severe pain. Well, I couldn't walk, but I could sit. And that meant a lot to me because I was always interested in meditation. And I was living in the Bay Area. And as they say, there are more Buddhists in Asia than any other place on the planet except for the San Francisco Bay Area. And there were various types as well, various traditions. So I set upon a path to explore meditation deeply. Zen practices, Tibetan practices, Theravadan practices, the whole kit and caboodle. And when I heard the first noble truth from Buddha, this life has pain and suffering, I wept over those words. Because that's what I knew. And those words affirmed my experience. I had done nothing wrong. I just had karma. I don't know why. I didn't need to understand it. But the path to suffering, to healing suffering, was to develop a meditation practice, which is now commonly called mindfulness practice. And so for the next year and a half, I was a serial meditator all over California. I did week-long, 2-week-long, 90-day silent retreats. I'd show up with my crutches, push myself into the meditation room, and that's where I was. They were kind enough. Buddhists are great. They're so kind. They're always getting service when they do a good deed, so people were ringing up good service for me by serving me meals and all the rest of it. And I learned how to meditate. And I learned about compassion for the great teachings of the Buddha, but also for the gift of suffering. It had opened me up to learning about the truest nature of our human experience. Nothing to be afraid of or ashamed of. And peace and calm came across me as I had never imagined. So much so that as I healed from my foot injury, I decided to work at Zen Hospice in San Francisco. I was compelled to be with the deepest type of suffering I could imagine, those dying. I consider myself a bit of an expert now in pain and suffering, but I really wanted to do the ultimate test. And so I signed up for Zen Hospice, got great training, was placed at Laguna Honda Hospital, which is a public hospital with 24 open beds, which is good when you're a hospice worker because that's lots of people dying, and it's really a gift to be with them. And one day I was working with a gentleman, a merchant marine. I was reading him a story, and suddenly I found myself floating above his body and my body. And I hadn't stopped reading. And he looked at me with a smile on his face, as if to say, check this out. I remembered this state because I had had 2 near-death experiences, and it was remarkably similar. I went back into my body. I don't know how. I don't even think I stopped reading. I went up to my Buddhist supervisor and said, I got to share this with you. You're not going to believe it. My Buddhist supervisor, being a good Buddhist, said, William, phenomena rolling by, let it be. So much for that experience. Well, while I was at Zen Hospice, that seemed to open the door for other mystical experiences. I saw and felt presences come into the room at the end as people were dying. I saw light change in ways that I never thought imaginable. Even the room would change in terms of hard edges becoming soft. And I felt sublime feelings of love and peace at the bedside of many people with whom I had the privilege of sharing their final moments. Life collapsed again. My health collapsed one more time. My back pain surged. My foot injury returned. I was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a day. I didn't know it then, but I had Lyme's disease. At the same time that my health was crashing, another family member was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. My nephew of 9 years old at the time. My brother, who's a doctor, said, we need a miracle. I was a transpersonal psychotherapist working in a very progressive center in San Francisco. Colleague said to me, you might want to consider John of God. I said, John of God? No idea who John of God was. I'll cut to the chase. We went to go see John of God for my nephew, ostensibly, but when John of God saw me, he said, I can help you too, but it's going to take a long time. Well, I'm going to explain a little bit about God, John, just briefly. He's probably the leading alternative healer on the planet. Between 1,000 and 2,000 people visit him every day. When we were there in 2004 through 2007 or 2009, that was pre-Oprah Winfrey's bringing him to the world. There was only about 300 to 400 people there a day. Spiritism, which is the practice of John of God, believes that we're having an earthly experience. When we die, we go into the spirit realm. But those spirits, our family members, continue to be in relationship with us. We're always together in one way or another. And John of God, being a powerful medium and channel, can communicate with all those spirits, but in particular, he works with the real powerhouse spirits that do miracle healing. So at the center, you pass before John of God, you ask for the healing you want, and then you go sit in his meditation currents. When I was there, my body would just shake and tremble. I had no idea what was going on. I now know that there's some sort of resonant field to the healing that happens when you work with different vibrations of spirit energy. I had more mystical experiences as I sat in those meditation halls, intense feelings of love and appreciation for the gift of life. And when I realized that my healing was going slower than I wanted, I told my family, I think I need to move here to heal. My wife said, fine, let's move here. I'm kind of tired of your pain and suffering. And so we did. And we stayed for 2 years. And one time during the middle of that stay, I came up to see John of God. And I said, I don't think I'm really healing here. I've been meditating 6 hours a day for about a year and a half. I was kind of upset. And he said to me, by the way, it's not John of God, it's a loving spirit that works through him. He says, my child, your pain is old. You've suffered for many lifetimes. Take a seat in my current. I will show you. I said, oh my God. I closed my eyes, went into a deep, deep meditation. And he played the movie of my life. Not this life, my life through many human incarnations. And I saw the repeated behaviors and relationships over many lifetimes. I wept as I awakened to this truth. It was right before me. No denying it. Any beliefs I had about anything were laid asunder with direct experience. I felt and saw myself throughout the ages suffering in the same ways over and over again. This was extremely helpful. Something happened that allowed me to let go of all my holding trauma in my body. And as I left, after 2 years, the last thing I asked him was, "Can you help me find meaningful work? I'm going back to Santa Barbara." And he says, "Oh yes," he smiled big. "You won't have to look for it. It will find you." And so I returned. I've been in Santa Barbara 5 years. I no longer have chronic pain. I stand before you. I can walk, I can run, I can do yoga. I consider it to be a miracle. I really do. You would not recognize me. Most of you, I've only been here 5 years, but anyone who knew me before said, "Oh my God, what's happened to you?" So I joined the Family Therapy Institute. I work as a therapist there. But I knew my work wasn't really defined just yet. And in 2009, I was at a talk with Raymond Moody, and he was talking about the shared death experience. This remarkable experience when you sit at the bedside of someone dying and you go into the afterlife with them, or the initial stages. I just shared one experience with you. I immediately remembered my experiences at Zen Hospice. And more than that, my body was shaking like it did when I was with John of God, that resonant knowing. And then it came right through me, and those familiar, loving spirits came right into me and said, "This is your work." And so now I lead groups and counsel loved ones, end-of-life practitioners, about how to be conscious about what happens at the end of a life and how to prepare for a shared death experience, if that's what you're interested in. And so I want to wrap up by saying, summarize just a little bit about the key learnings. 1 minute, Barbara's looking at me. So, how does one make the most out of this life, given life's uncertainty and challenges? Pain is part of life. And as this lovely youth minister shared with us, we never know what it is. We never know the meaning of pain. But to answer it, to respond to it as it's bad, it's a problem, is not the truest response. Pema Chodron says to us, the great Buddhist teacher, when we experience pain, it does not mean we've done something wrong or something's wrong with us. Pain and suffering are a natural part of life. And also, pain is a great teacher and healer. Gibran, the prophet, says, pain is the breaking of the shell that leads to our understanding. I'm going to go a bit farther and say, pain is the ultimate wake-up call that invites us to evolve or heal some aspect of our being. And my life, I humbly say, asserts testimony to this. I'm going to go out on a limb here, based on my experience, and say, we are not our bodies. We are not our bodies. Something, our consciousness survives human death. And my sense is, we're eternal. Can't prove that. But every feeling, every part of my body says it's true. And finally, this life is a school. Based on what I've seen in my mystical experiences, this is very temporary. The main event is somewhere else. This is a classroom. Enjoy it, because we'll be out of here soon. And it also explains why we're willing to take on so much pain here, because it's short. So I say finally, trust this life. I do. I think it's the greatest gift we have. It's the only thing we know. Leave nothing out, especially the pain. Allow for it all. It's a kind design. It's a mystery we will never understand. So thank you.